Hello everyone, I'm Arindam Ghosh, as I've already introduced myself, and this is my probably fifth lecture on Marxism, and today I'll begin with Antonio Gramsci, the godfather of cultural Marxism, and we'll discuss how and why Gramsci is an important thinker while discussing classical Marxism and cultural studies. So, a pivotal figure in the development of the classical Marxism into the neo-Marxist thinking is the Italian communist and thinker Antonio Gramsci from 1891 to 1937. And his work was written largely when he was sentenced to the life imprisonment by Benito Mussolini's fascist dictatorship in Italy in 1926. And he elaborated his concept of hegemony, quote unquote, and cultural hegemony inside the prison house, while he was a kind of prisoner in the under the imprisonment of the Italian fascists. So he elaborated the concept of the hegemony, which actually attempts to explain not only why the workers might not be revolutionary, but why they could turn into fascists. So Gramsci actually confronted Marxism and pointed out for the first time certain limitations of Marxism. And Gramsci said that Karl Marx insisted that historical change must be explained in terms of the economic base or economic substructure. According to Marx, the base is consisted of the economic relations, specifically the means of production and the relations of the production. Antonio Gramsci, for the first time, countered this notion of the economic substructure. He said that economics is definitely important, but he said that this form of economic determinism অনেক বেশি অর্থনৈতিক কেন্দ্রিক যে মার্ক্সের চিন্তা, সেটা মার্ক্সের চিন্তাকে অনেকটা ওয়ান ডাইমেনশনাল করে দিচ্ছে। তিনি প্রথমবার বললেন যে কালচারাল কলোনিয়ালিজম, সাংস্কৃতিগতভাবে উপনিবেশবাদ, সাংস্কৃতিগতভাবে কেমনভাবে ক্যাপিটালিজম বা পুঁজিবাদ আস্তে আস্তে এই ওয়ার্কিং ক্লাসেদেরকে পঙ্গু করে দিচ্ছে, রাষ্ট্র কেমন করে সংস্কৃতিকে বা কালচারকে ইউজ করে অলমোস্ট অ্যাজ এ ওয়েপন, এবং সেই যে সেই দিকটার কথাও যে বলার প্রয়োজন, এটা অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি প্রথম এই প্রিজন হাউসের মধ্যে বসে ইটালিয়ান মার্কসিস্ট অ্যান্ড কমিউনিস্ট প্রথমবার বলেন। অ্যান্ড হি সেড দ্য সুপারস্ট্রাকচার অফ ইনস্টিটিউশনস, for example, be it religion, law and culture, is always, according to the Marxist principle, is subordinate to the economy. But the economic changes determine changes of the social values in the superstructure also, because base is influencing superstructure, at the same time the superstructure is also influencing the base. So Gramsci wanted to eliminate this economic determinism and replace it with explanations of the social change that lay in the superstructure, in the realm of the ideas rather than on the realm of the economy. So this Italian Marxist, generally known as the godfather of the cultural Marxism, for the first time gave importance to the formation of the culture and how the discourse is formed based on cultural hegemony. He talked about all these things inside the corridors of the prison. So Antonio Gramsci, as I have already told you about his biographical details, he was born in 1897, died in 1937. He was an Italian Marxist thinker, philosopher and politician. He attempted to break this notion of the economic determinism out of the traditional Marxist thought, and hence he is generally considered as a neo-Marxist. He was a founding member and one-time leader of the Communist Party of the Italy, and was imprisoned by, as I've already mentioned, Benito Mussolini's fascist regime. He wrote throughout his life more than 30 notebooks, and 300 odd pages of history and analysis during his imprisonment. It is known as the famous prison notebooks. বন্দি দশার নোটবুক হিসেবে পরিচিত গ্রামসির লেখা. It is generally considered as a highly original contribution to the 20th century political theory and philosophy. Gramsci drew insights from various sources such as Niccolo Machiavelli, from the Vilfredo Pareto, from Georges Sorel, and of course Benedetto Croce. The notebooks covers a wide range of the topics, including the Italian history of the nationalism, the French Revolution, the history of the fascism, civil society, which will eventually play a very important notion in Antonio Gramsci's brand of the Marxism, how civil society, বুদ্ধিজীবী যাকে বাংলায় বলে, তাদের যে কি বিরাট বড় রোল রয়েছে এই মার্কসিজমে তার কথা অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি প্রথম বলেন. He also talks about the role of the folklore, religion, and of course popular culture in forming the cultural hegemony, the discourse of the cultural hegemony. So Antonio Gramsci প্রথম মার্কসের চিন্তাভাবনায় অর্থনীতির প্রভাবকে কমিয়ে খানিকটা সংস্কৃতিগত প্রভাবের কথা, সংস্কৃতির দিকটা তিনি দেখতে বলেন. কারণ তার মতে politics is very much connected with culture. Politics is very much connected with other forms of popular culture, with art, with literature, with philosophy, with drama and other forms of art. So what is Gramsci's notion of the cultural hegemony? This is actually a painting taken from Rupert Woodfin's famous book, The Graphic Guide to Marxism. Here there is occurring a kind of imaginary conversation between Marx and Gramsci. And Marx said to Gramsci that we don't see the world in a neutral, objective manner, but in ways that are determined by the attitudes that we naturally take for granted. We have certain opinions, the opinions actually imposed upon us by the society and of course by the contemporary political leaders, those who are in power, and we see the world based on these attitudes. Marx called this attitude as ideology. But Gramsci said that I think ideology is not simply economically determined, but relatively autonomous and crucial and sometimes consensual. অনেক ক্ষেত্রে অনুমতি সাপেক্ষ এই ইডিওলজি ক্রিয়েটেড হয়, নট অলওয়েজ বেসড অন কোয়ারশন. শুধুমাত্র পুঁজিবাদ বা শুধুমাত্র ক্যাপিটালিজম তাদের মতামতটা সাধারণ মানুষের ওপরে, প্রোলেটারিয়েটদের ওপরে জোর করে চাপিয়ে দেয় না. অনেক সময় কনসেনসুয়ালি, অনেক সময় এই স্লেভরা, এই দোজ হু আর প্রোলেটারিয়েট, দোজ হু ডু নট ওন দ্য মিনস অফ দ্য প্রোডাকশন, তারা সারেন্ডার করে এই ক্যাপিটালিস্ট সংস্কৃতির কাছে, নানা লোভের কাছে. যেটার কথা মার্কস বলে যাননি, যেটা মার্কস শুধুমাত্র বলেছিলেন ইকোনমিক ডিটারমিনিজমের কথা. So Gramsci emphasized for the first time the role of the human agency and choice, human choice, the ability of a human to make choice. Not always hegemony or colonization, not always happens through coercion. So while maintaining the Marxist reality of the class struggle, he claimed that the class struggle must always take place through ideology, and ideas could bring about the revolution and equally prevent it at the same time. So ideas are very important. So for the first time, by introducing the concept of the cultural hegemony, Gramsci said that the bourgeois use cultural institutions to maintain power in the capitalist societies. These cultural institutions can be schools, can be colleges, can be universities. Through these cultural institutions, they try to maintain power in the capitalist societies. The bourgeois, in Gramsci's view, develops a hegemonic culture using ideology rather than violence, economic force, or coercion. So hegemonic culture propagates its own values and norms so that they become the common sense values of all and thus maintain the status quo. Hegemonic power is therefore used to maintain. So according to Gramsci, hegemonic power is therefore used to maintain consent to the capitalist order rather than the coercive power using force to maintain order. So hegemonic power is based on consent, not on the coercion. So thus this cultural hegemony is produced and reproduced by the dominant class through the institutions that form the superstructure. So here it is a transactional process. The economic base is not only influencing the cultural superstructure, the cultural superstructure is also influencing the base, because hegemony is established through consent by these various cultural institutions like schools, like colleges, like prison houses, for example hospital. এই ধরনের জিনিসপত্র তৈরি করে অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি প্রথমবার বললেন যে ক্যাপিটালিস্টরা আস্তে আস্তে, পুঁজিবাদীরা অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই, যারা প্রোলেটারিয়েট, যারা মানে দোজ হু ডোন্ট ওন এনি মিনস অফ প্রোডাকশন, যারা সর্বহারা, তাদের মতামতকে পাল্টাবার চেষ্টা করে। ফর এক্সাম্পল, আমি একজন বিরাট বড় ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়ালিস্ট, আমার বেশ কয়েকটা বড় ইন্ডাস্ট্রি রয়েছে, আমি কনস্ট্যান্টলি তোমাদের মতো সাধারণ মানুষকে এক্সপ্লয়েট করার চেষ্টা করি, সর্বহারাদের ওপরে জোর করে আমি আমার আধিপত্য বিস্তার করার চেষ্টা করি। আমি এটা প্রথম কাজ করব, আমি একটা বড় হসপিটাল তৈরি করব, আমি একটা স্কুল এবং কলেজ তৈরি করব, যেখানে এই এক্সপ্লয়েটেড মানুষদের ছেলেমেয়েরা খানিকটা হলেও কম পয়সায় পড়তে পারবে। কিন্তু আসলে আমার যে সারপ্লাস মানি, আমার যে উদ্বৃত্ত মূল্য, সারপ্লাস লেবার, its amount is much more than the cost of the establishment of the hospital, of the schools and the colleges. এই ধরনের সোকল্ড ফিলান্থ্রপিক অ্যাক্টিভিটি করার মাধ্যমে আমি কেবলমাত্র দেখাচ্ছি আমি তোমাদের কতটা কাছের লোক, আমি এই প্রোলেটারিয়েটদের কতটা কাছের লোক, একজন ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়ালিস্ট হয়ে দেখাচ্ছি। এই যে কালচারাল ইনস্টিটিউশনের মাধ্যমে আমি একটা মগজ ধোলাইয়ের চেষ্টা করছি এবং বিভিন্ন ধরনের ফ্যাসিলিটি দিচ্ছি টু দ্য প্রোলেটারিয়েট, যার ফলে প্রোলেটারিয়ান রেভলিউশন পরবর্তীকালে হবে না, আটকে যাবে। ক্যাপিটালিজমের এটাই বড়, সবচেয়ে বড় ক্ষমতা যে কনস্ট্যান্টলি এটার স্ট্রাকচার বদলেছে। প্রফেসর আন্দ্রে গুন্ডার ফ্র্যাঙ্ক, a famous American Marxist philosopher, he said, আমি কয়েকদিন আগে আমার এক দাদার সঙ্গে আলোচনা করছিলাম, he said that whenever I criticize capitalism by making various points in my class lectures or in my articles, তার পরের বছরই ওয়ার্ল্ড ট্রেড অর্গানাইজেশন কোনো না কোনো একটা তাদের পয়েন্টে আমার যে ইনক্লুড করা পয়েন্টটাকে ঢুকিয়ে দেয়। সো ক্যাপিটালিজম কনস্ট্যান্টলি নিজেকে পরিবর্তন করে, অন্য মানুষকে সংস্কৃতিগতভাবে কলোনাইজ করার মাধ্যমে এই বিভিন্ন ইনস্টিটিউশনের থ্রু দিয়ে, বিট স্কুল, বিট কলেজ, বিট ভ্যারিয়াস লিটারারি ফেস্টিভ্যাল, বিট সিনেমা, এইগুলো থ্রু দিয়ে কলোনাইজ করার চেষ্টা করে। কে করে? না ডমিনেন্ট ক্লাস। যে কথাটা মার্কস তার থিওরির মধ্যে বলে যাননি, গ্রামসি ইন হিজ থিওরি অফ দ্য কালচারাল হেজিমনি টকড অ্যাবাউট these cultural institutions which maintain power in capitalist societies. Moving on to the next, Gramsci answered that how hegemony can be established in the society. He said that the dominant class needs to establish what might be called the spontaneous consent. স্বতঃস্ফূর্তভাবে অনুমোদন সাপেক্ষে এই কলোনাইজেশনটা বা এই এক্সপ্লয়টেশনটা হবে। Some way of inducing consensus across the whole society. So how this consensus will be achieved? Asked Marx, and he said that hegemony can be characterized in the following points. What are they? First, agreement from the majority of a society for the picture of life that represented by those in power. Second, the values, both moral and political, involved in this agreement will be largely those of the ruling class. The ruling class will eventually determine the moral and the political value in this agreement between the labor classes, the proletariat and the bourgeois. The ruling class will dominate. The ideology comes to be seen as an evident common sense by the majority of the people. লোকে মনে করবে এটাই কমন সেন্স, এটাই তো হওয়ার কথা ছিল, স্কুল এবং কলেজ তো এস্টাবলিশ করারই কথা ছিল মালিক পক্ষের, আমার তো ইন্স্যুরেন্স, মেডিকেল ইন্স্যুরেন্স করে দিচ্ছে মালিক পক্ষ, তাহলে আমি কেন প্রশ্ন করবো? সো এইভাবে সুপার স্ট্রাকচার কেমন করে বেসকে ইনফ্লুয়েন্স করছে তার কথা অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি প্রথম বললেন। দ্য কনসেন্ট ইজ অ্যারাইভড at largely peacefully, but physical force can be used to support it against a dissident minority. Sometimes repressive state mechanism, এটা পরবর্তীকালে অ্যালথিউজার যার কথা বলবেন, অ্যালথিউজার will talk about two forces. One is the ideological state apparatus, another is the repressive state apparatus. Repressive state apparatus, for example, the police force, the army, the other vigorous forms and virulent forms of the state machinery, while ideological machineries are those of the media, the newspaper, of course literature, art, culture. So Gramsci said that this cultural hegemony will be established not through physical coercion but basically through a consent, not through coercion but through consent, but eventually physical force can be used to support it sometimes. So in this context, Gramsci talked about the importance of the civil society and ideological struggle. Gramsci argued that the Bolshevik Russian Revolution of 1917 worked because the conditions were ripe for such a sudden upheaval. He described that the Russian Revolution as an example of a war of movement due to its sudden and complete overthrow of the existing governing structure of the society. And Gramsci reasoned that in the Russia of 1917, the state was everything and civil society was primordials and gelatinous. So he said that in Russia of 1917, state was everything. State machinery was everything. There was no conception of the civil society in Tsarist aristocratic Russia. সেখানে সিভিল সোসাইটি বলে, বুদ্ধিজীবী সমাজ বলে কিছু ছিলই না। এর ফলে সেখানে খুব সহজে স্টেট মেশিনারির বিরুদ্ধে একটা হেড অন কলিশন করে স্টেট মেশিনারিকে ফেলে দেওয়া সম্ভব। কিন্তু ইন ডেভেলপড ওয়েস্টার্ন সোসাইটিজ লাইক জার্মানি, be it Italy, in Spain, when there is a voice, a very robust civil society. For example, Roma Rolla and other great intellectuals participated against the raised their voice against the venomous atrocities that were organized before and after the First World War, and hence a direct attack on the current rulers could be effective in Russia because there existed no other significant structure or institutions of political influence that needed to overcome. While on the other hand, in Western societies, in contrast with the Tsarist Russia, Gramsci observed that the state is only an outer layer, an outer reach, behind which lies a robust and sturdy civil society. And those who are in power, they can use this civil society. মানুষ কিন্তু ইউরোপে নাটক দেখতে যায়, কবিতা পড়ে, মানুষ কিন্তু উপন্যাস পড়ে ইউরোপে। ফলে একটা স্টাডি রোবাস্ট সিভিল সোসাইটির এক্সিস্টেন্স, একটা কালচারাল প্র্যাকটিসের এক্সিস্টেন্স ইউরোপ জুড়ে রয়েছে। এর ফলে ইডিওলজিক্যাল স্ট্রাগল ছাড়া খুব সহজে এইভাবে পাওয়ারকে গ্র্যাব করা যাবে না মার্কসিস্ট, ক্লাসিক্যাল মার্কসিস্ট থিওরি দিয়ে। এটার কথাই অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি said for the first time in his prison notebooks. And Gramsci believed that the conditions in Russia in 1917 that made revolution possible would not materialize in the more advanced capitalist countries like the Western Europe. The strategy must be different and must include a mass democratic movement and ideological struggle. An ideological class struggle must be involved. The proletarian revolution will not be a very easy task in the much more industrialized, developed West, much like the Bolshevik Russian Revolution. অতটা সহজে হবে না, কারণ জারিস্ট রাশিয়াতে কোনো ডেমোক্রেটিক ইনস্টিটিউশন, কোনো ডেমোক্রেটিক ভয়েস ছিল না যেটা ওয়েস্টার্ন ইউরোপে থাকবে। ফলে এই ইম্পর্টেন্ট কোয়েশ্চেনটা রেজ করলো ফর দ্য ফার্স্ট টাইম অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি। And Gramsci talked about the war of position rather than the war of movement. So what is the conception of the word of position? Gramsci advocated for the first time about a word of position instead of a word of movement. And it was not actually a rebuke of the revolution, just it's a different tactics. So Gramsci talked about the employment of a different strategy, a tactic that required the infiltration of the influential democratic organizations that make up the civil society. Civil society যে ইম্পর্ট্যান্ট স্ট্রাকচারাল পার্ট সেগুলো ইন্টেলেকচুয়ালরা যাতে দখল করে নিতে পারে তার কথা প্রথম অ্যান্টোনিও গ্রামসি বলল। And Gramsci likened these organizations, he actually compared these organizations with that of the trenches in which the war of position would need to be fought. And I'm quoting Gramsci from his prison notebooks that the massive structures of the modern democracies, both as the state organizations and as the complexes of associations in civil society, constitute for the art of politics as it were the trenches and the permanent fortifications of the front in the war of position. They render merely partial the element of maneuver which before used the whole of the war. So instead of a war of movement, Gramsci propagated about the war of position. War of movement is a frontal assault on the state, whereas a war of position is conducted mainly in the terrain of the civil society. So war of movement may be possible in Tsarist Russia when there was no other democratic institutions, cultural institutions, where it's very much easy for Lenin to attack the Tsarist autocracy in his head-on collision. But in a more developed, westernized Europe, the war of position has been recommended by Antonio Gramsci, and Gramsci likened political warfare rather than the military warfare. And with this war of movement akin to the frontal assault of a rapid military attack upon the opening of a breach in the enemy's defenses to attain a rapid and definitive victory. And Gramsci said that this political warfare will eventually involve the movement of the war of position. So in contrast, Gramsci likened the war of position, likened this war of position to the trench warfare, settling in for a long-term struggle with the strategic smaller victories to gain more territory beat by beat. So slowly and slowly, eventually, communism will win through a progress by employing the war of position. And the war of position will eventually happen by employing the ideological state apparatuses or by employing the much more democratic cultural institutions. So that was Gramsci's take. Gramsci also talked about, Gramsci had a very specific and important viewpoint on the intellectuals, about the role of the intellectual, role of the society, of the civil society in organizing the revolution. He said that the role of the intellectuals defined much more broadly by Gramsci, and he said every person was partly an intellectual, but not every person had the function of being a specialized intellectual. He distinguished between two forms of intellectual. One is organic intellectuals and another is the traditional intellectual. Who are the organic intellectuals? Organic intellectuals are those who connected to a specific class in the sense that they can best articulate the worldview of an emerging important class of people. They can articulate the entire worldview in a very specific technical manner to a particular class of people. He said that in organizing a revolution, the organic intellectuals are necessary, while traditional intellectuals are those who are deposited by a previous historical process, who believe themselves to be above history, economy, and politics, the transcendental figures, those who believe that they are above history, economy, and politics. Gramsci said that these intellectuals will be of not much more of a great help to to the proletariats in organizing the revolution. He said that the organic intellectuals are the necessity of the hour. Gramsci at the same time also coined a famous term which actually becomes a catchword of the post-colonial history. The word is subaltern. In describing the cultural hegemony as a popular history, Gramsci coined the particular term, the word subaltern, to identify the social groups excluded and displaced from the socio-economic institutions of the society in order to deny their political voices. So subaltern are those who don't have basically any form of political, historical or cultural voice. Those who are actually beyond the scope of the discourse, those who are beyond the scope of any form of hierarchy, has been called subaltern by Antonio Gramsci. Actually, he used the word subaltern because of a kind of strategic purpose, because he was writing those prison notebooks in the prison, and hence he should use certain words which would remain very much obscure or at least unknown to the authority, and hence he used the word subaltern for the marginalized, for the voiceless people, and he used the word praxis in referring to Marxism. So the term subaltern and subaltern studies entered into the vocabulary of the post-colonial studies later with the subaltern studies group of historians headed by Professor Ranajit Guha, Partha Chatterjee, Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, which I have already discussed with you in the post-colonial section. Now we will move into the various schools of the Marxist thought. But before that, I'll end Gramsci by saying that Gramsci is the first godfather of cultural Marxism. He for the first time announced the birth of alternative Marxism. Gramsci thought that a frontal attack on an unpopular autocratic regime such as Tsarist Russia had a good chance of success. But in liberal democratic societies, as I've already mentioned, the struggle would be no longer and would involve ideas and culture, would no longer involve only the military tools. So rather than just politics and economics, it will involve the cultural activities. So these are intricate and extensive civil societies with complex and interlinked bonds between the people and various groups. And Marx, the classical theory of Marx said that the revolutionary hegemonic change will take time and effort, but Gramsci said that it will eventually involve a kind of change in the strategy. It will eventually involve a kind of movement, a change from the war of movement to the war of position. It will essentially involve a kind of change in the tactics and in the strategy. And he for the first time talked about the importance of the intellectuals, the organic intellectuals, and not the traditional intellectuals. And from Antonio Gramsci, various Marxist schools of thought actually born: classical Marxism, Leninism, left communism, and various other schools, which I'll discuss shortly. Gramsci's influence, it can be said truly that it was an absolutely a vigorous and virulent influence on the contemporary time, and he changed the discourse of the trajectory of the Marxist discourse. And after Gramsci, Marxism completely took a different turn, and it is known as the Western Marxism. So let us now discuss about these various Marxist schools of thought. What are they? The first, as I have already discussed with you, the classical Marxism, which was prevalent at the time of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Classical Marxism basically denotes the classical collection of the works of the socio-economic and political thinkers of Marx and Engels. It is classical Marxism, prevalent around 1884, before the death of the Marx. Then Leninism appeared in the scenario. What is Leninism? Vladimir Lenin, the person who organized 2 consecutive revolutions in Russia, an applied Marxism in actually practical field. He always talked about that professional revolutionaries should organize proletarian revolution. Lenin said that professional revolutionaries must organize these proletarian revolutions, and there should be a kind of revolutionary vanguard party under whose aegis all these revolutionaries will organize themselves. So Lenin's interpretations of Marxist theory for practical application to the socio-political conditions of the agrarian early 20th century Russian Empire became very much successful, and hence Leninism also becomes a very crucial, important tool for revolution. While there is also left communism. Left communism is a range of communist viewpoints held by the communist left, which criticizes the political ideas of the Bolsheviks and of the Leninism. Hermann Gother, Anton Pannekoek, Otto Rühle, Karl Korsch, they are the exponents of the left communism. Left communism differs from the most of the other forms of Marxism in believing that communists should not participate in bourgeois parliaments. Left communism rejected the importance of the bourgeois parliaments and said that, and some argue against participating in conservative trade unions also. So it's a much more stringent policy. It's a much more kind of rigid form of Marxism. Moving into other forms of Marxism, there is the council communism. The core principle of the council communism is that the government and the economy should be managed by the workers' council, composed of the delegates and delegates elected at the workplaces. And council communists oppose the state-run authoritarian socialism or state capitalism as propounded by Lenin or Stalin. While on the other hand, Trotskyism oppose Stalinism. As I have already said, that Trotskyism is a philosophy developed by Leon Trotsky, a revolutionary thinker in Russia at the time of the Lenin, who supports the theory of the permanent revolution and world revolution instead of this two-stage theory and socialism in one country. What is two-stage theory? Two-stage theory is that socialism will happen in two stages. দুটো স্তরে এই সোশ্যালিজমটা আলটিমেটলি হবে। প্রথমে it will create a form of bourgeois revolution, as well as it will take help of the capitalists, and after strengthening the economy, it will transition into socialism. এই যে তত্ত্বটাকে লেনিন বলেছিল টু স্টেজ থিওরি, and he introduced the new economic policy, তার এগেনস্টে Trotskyian idea of socialism দাঁড়ায়, and Trotskyian socialism always talked about the theory of the very important word permanent revolution. And Trotsky claimed that this under the leadership of the Stalin, communism becomes a degenerated viewpoint, while Marxism and Leninism is a theory propounded by Stalinism. Later it transformed into a Stalinist thinking. It refers to the socio-economic system and political ideology implemented by Stalin in the Soviet Union, and which has been later copied by the other states based on the Soviet model. Some of the intricate features of this form of governance is that central planning, কেন্দ্রীয় প্ল্যানিং হবে, collectivization of agriculture, কৃষির ওপরে জোর দেওয়া হবে, কমিউনিস্ট পার্টি লেড স্টেট, পার্টি মানেই রাষ্ট্র, রাষ্ট্র মানেই পার্টি, পার্টি মানেই একটা মানুষ, and he is Stalin. Rapid industrialization, nationalization of the commanding heights of the economy, and the theory of the socialism in only one country. So Stalinism refers to the Stalin's style of governance, celebration of the cult personality, and celebration of a totalitarian vanguard state. So after Stalinism, there is also another form, another school of Marxism known as Maoism. What is Maoism? Maoism is a theory propounded by Mao Zedong. I have already discussed it. It's the basic difference between Marxist Leninism and Maoism is that peasantry are the revolutionary vanguard in pre-industrial societies rather than the proletariat. So there lies a classical difference between Marxism and Maoism. মার্কস বলেছিল যে যারা ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়াল প্রোলেটারিয়েট, যারা কাজ করে, শ্রমিক যারা কারখানায় কাজ করে, তারাই বিপ্লব করবে, তারাই রেভলিউশন করবে। মা বললো না, যারা কৃষক, যারা খেটে খাওয়া মানুষ, যেটা ভিয়েতনামে হয়েছিল হো চি মিনের নেতৃত্বে, এই খেটে খাওয়া মানুষগুলো বিপ্লব করতে পারে এবং তাদের যে ইডিওলজিক্যাল, সেই ক্ষেত্রে ইডিওলজিক্যাল অর্থোডক্সি ইজ সেকেন্ডারি, দ্য প্রাইমারি ইজ রেভলিউশন, দ্য রেভলিউশনারি প্র্যাকসিস। মানে বিপ্লব করতে হবে, সে কৃষকই হোক আর শিল্পর সঙ্গে, কারখানার সঙ্গে অ্যাসোসিয়েটেড শ্রমিকই হোক না কেন। তো মাওয়িজম লেনিন এবং মার্কসের আইডিয়াকে একটু পরিবর্তন করে চাইনিজ কনটেক্সটে, চাইনিজ আমাদের মাথায় রাখতে হবে, চায়না একটা ওয়ার্ল্ড লর্ডের জায়গা ছিল। কুইং ডাইনাস্টি প্রায় 1644 থেকে সেখানে রেইন করেছে, from 1644 down to 1914. সো সেখানে মাওয়িজম মার্কসিজমকে এস্টাবলিশ করেছিল একটা অন্য ফর্মে। অ্যান্ড অফকোর্স দেয়ার আর লিবার্টেরিয়ান মার্কসিজম which emphasize the anti-authoritarian aspects of the Marxism, and it actually specifically criticizes Lenin and Stalin. And of course there is Western Marxism, very important, যার কথা আমরা আমাদের লিটারেচারে, কালচার স্টাডিজ খুব ইম্পর্টেন্ট। Gramsci is part of the Western Marxism. It actually arising from the Western and Central Europe. The school denotes a loose connection of theories who advanced an interpretation of the Marxism distinct from the codified rule propounded by the Soviet Russia. Some of the Western Marxists are of course George Lucas, Karl Korsch, Walter Benjamin, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse and the others, the school of the Frankfurt School and the others. Structural Marxism, another particular Marxism, we will discuss about it regarding Louis Althusser and others. Neo-Marxism is a form of Marxism derived from, of course, Antonio Gramsci, the Marxism propounded by Jean-Paul Sartre, the Marxism propounded by the Weberian sociology, Olin Wright, etc. And of course, I will discuss about the Frankfurt School. It's a school of the social theory and social philosophy, which interpreted Marxism in a completely different light from the codified Soviet rule, completely differentiated it from the codified Soviet rule, and it gives us, rather it criticizes various impure forms of other cultures and criticizes popular cultures in a different way. And it talks about how an ideal human being should use leisure and build up a much more important culture for the society itself. So there are other Marxist schools like the autonomous Marxism, British Marxist historians propounded by the school of the Christopher Hill, E.P. Thompson, Eric Hobsbawm and others. Analytical Marxism, there is the school of the Eurocommunism, Marxist theology, etc. So for us, we will now move into Marxism and cultural theory, and we will discuss about the various important aspects of the Marxist literary criticism in the next class, and then we will move into George Lucas, a very important figure in the Western Marxism. We will discuss him and his ideology in the next class. Thank you. See you in my 6th lecture. And from this lecture onwards, we will finish off Marxism perhaps in the 8th or in the 9th lecture. We'll discuss the Frankfurt School, George Lucas, of course, Louis Althusser, to some extent the Spectre of Marx by Jacques Derrida, and a small portion of Ernest Laclau. So thank you. We'll see you in the next class. In the next class, we'll start the importance of Marxism in the cultural theory. Thank you.